I love that.
Welcome to and also. We have just had a unanimous meeting on both the season and the episode number, so we agree that it is episode 2, season 2, episode 14.
Yes.
And
And write in if it's not.
and if you don't agree, that's fine because we very well could be wrong. Either way, this is Kirk and John, where we take a few moments to talk through kind of the series of messages happening at Faith Alliance Church. And we happen to be in the book of Revelation, which is thrilling and exciting. And I'm excited to talk through kind of the first couple chapters as we got started. Um, so, really, what I'm looking for from Kirk is to answer all the symbolic questions
I
of
mean, this should be
Revelation,
pretty
all of
easy.
them.
I think everyone
We
already
will
knows this.
solve Revelation single handedly.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, it's been solved. I don't know what else there is to say about it.
And thank you for joining us
Yeah,
today. It's
that
that's
was great.
it's all done. Um, all right, so we got into 1 and 2. Uh, what are you as we just look at the first couple chapters in Revelation? What are you seeing, noticing, thinking about?
What is the nickname for this uh, disciple John,
The beloved.
the beloved? He's horrified and struck down with fear at the
That's
one who
interesting.
calls him the beloved and the one who he should recognize.
Mm,
But he's gobsmacked
mm.
and awestruck when he sees the presentation of Jesus as he is at this moment.
I fell as one though dead. Yeah,
Right.
that's really I've that's interesting. That's a good point.
And that actually fascinates me because the Gospel of John is a little lofty, right? A lot of
Mm,
imagery and comes at things from a different perspective. Where the other Gospels are, um, this is the lineage, right? And he starts out. In the beginning was the Word. Uh, well, that's an interesting way to begin things, right? So already existential, and it's such a strange and beautiful perspective to start things off with in the gospel. And
mm.
then when we get to here, now he's been sitting on an island collecting his thoughts for a while, watching the hermit crabs fight each other or something. I don't know what else he's doing with his time, but clearly a moment comes when now he is overcome.
Mm,
And that's actually amazing
mm.
to me because here's the one who stood there at the cross until Jesus died, right? And was responsible for his mom.
Mm.
And now he is like, whoa, struck
Mm.
and shocked and writes a letter to 7 churches.
Mm.
Um, that also interesting to me because if you get marooned on an island, apparently there's the post office. That's that's fascinating how the Roman world worked. The post office at Patmos. But
Excuse me. I'd like to send this letter to
yeah,
Thyatira. I do like I'm caught up in, and I've been thinking a lot and reading a lot about apocalyptic imagery, the bigger than life stuff, which
mm,
is all of Revelation. And I've grown to really appreciate just how quickly you are the reader of John. I mean, John as the presenter, John is the messenger of this revelation. Um, and how quickly you're given both first and the last. Like you're given the cemented reality of Christ as first and the last, Alpha and the Omega, right? You're like, okay, here's God, right? God is first and the last. He's the first one to show up. He's the last one to leave. He's not, But then in the middle, so here's your reality. But then in the middle of that, we are gonna completely turn it around. The description of Jesus is the description that John sees, that he falls as one as a dead, is just so wild. It's so unlike, the sword coming out of his mouth, the feet burnt with burnished bronze refined in the furnace. His voice was like the roar of many waters. His right hand he held seven stars. It's such a great image to just completely say, okay, God is not moving, but now we're going to completely disrupt you, and this is what Christ looks like.
So it brings me back to the transfiguration.
Mm,
At that moment, Jesus is also, his appearance has changed,
mm,
and he just notes it, right? He doesn't
mm,
really say much. We get comment from Peter, but I mean, it's like at that instant, um, Jesus' appearance has dramatically changed, and it's noted
mm.
that he looks different.
Yeah.
Here we get, yeah, the glowing white hair, right, and then the a sword coming out of somebody's mouth would be rather surprising.
I
Uh,
take note of that. Yeah.
yeah, that would
Yeah.
make me stand back, and then the imagery of holding stars, and also your feet are glowing. Um, do they still have the piercing marks, or
Mm,
is that
mm,
not present at this time? When does that appear?
mm.
It can come and go. So it's fascinating.
Well, and even though they're not stuck on, but that there's not a committed, like this is we get this like revealed image of Jesus, but we also get
It's a
like
symbolic
in
image.
four
Yeah.
we also get him as a lamb, right? And like
Mm-hmm.
and then and then later on as he's the conquering king, he's like his robe is dipped in blood, and like there's all like the sword's still coming out of his mouth, but he's riding a white horse. It's all this, it's just great imagery. Like this is what he's like. This is or this is depending on the need of how Jesus is, it needs to be seen in this revelation. It's shown. It's just, but it could be, yeah, it could be as the lamb who's been slain. It could be the conquering king. I do like this initial uh, description, like starting in verse 12. It's because it just, to me, it's just like John gets knocked down on his feet. I'm like, you read this, you're like, oh, I get it. I get why he would. And it is a neat. I really like that. What would you call it? The dichotomy of
Mm.
that, like that versus the beloved, the one who yeah, that's just such a
When you
great
have that
thought.
kind, compassionate connection, and then you're shocked and awestruck,
Right.
and like
Something's going on.
weak in the knees suddenly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that is interesting right off the bat here, right before we even get to verse 12, is there's that passage that I listened to the I was listening for the voice of God, and in the wind it wasn't there. I listened to the voice in the roar of the waters, wasn't there, and it was a still small voice, right?
Huh.
And here we have a loud voice like a trumpet said,
Huh.
"Write this down." Which,
Just so you don't forget.
what? Whoa! Look out! So that would be startling. Yeah, if
Huh.
you're alone on an island, as far as we know. I mean,
Him in the post
him
office.
and the postal workers of the Roman Empire were alone on this island. I mean, I don't know how alone he really was because he's not starving to death. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing there were
Yeah,
guards, right?
at some point he had to have food and had to have,
Yeah, people are
maybe
dropping off
there's,
letters,
yeah,
so somehow or other, there's he's not that alone. He's just isolated.
yeah.
But that's interesting. Yeah, you have this imagery of suddenly somebody super loud says, "Write this down on a scroll."
Yeah.
So he had a scroll handy. That's great.
I bet you went and got one pretty quick. All right, I'll be right back.
Yeah. Okay. Write on a scroll what you see.
Well, that does say where, I don't have the verse in front of me, but come up and and I will show you what you should see. There was like this invitation in, um, it might not be in one, but there was, I can't find it. But anyway, that John is invited to come and see, like to come, that there was a this call, but then he had to like enter into it to understand it. Um, yeah, maybe it's in three even, but either way, there is a sense of it's unmistakable, right? That there's a and even not only is the voice unmistakable, but he says like verse 7 already. Behold, he's coming with the clouds. Every eye will see him, even those who pierced him. All the tribes in the earth will wail on account of him. Like there's, like we want to show you what things are going to be like that everybody will see, and we're going to, deafen you and blind you all. Like
Overwhelm your senses.
yeah, yeah,
Because this is more light coming out of him than he can process,
right,
and more sound than his ears can withstand.
yeah,
And it's just like, it's way overwhelming for his senses.
yeah.
And that's amazing. The description that he can even write this all down.
Well, that's even one of the, I actually I really like this conversation because there there is a sense in Revelation where it, like, there's an attempt to figure it all out, right? To, okay, what do now, again, some things are worthwhile. I'm not saying that we shouldn't figure things out. Like, we should figure out, okay, the seven gold lampstands, right? The churches, that means this. But there's sometimes we take the imagery and we try and drill down so deeply on it that we're trying to solve the mystery that is Revelation instead of, and again, not say that we shouldn't be thinking about what Revelation's about, but there is a point of, really, Revelation is a book of worship. It, like, especially, so 4 and 5, when you get the image of the throne, the I, the idea that's coming to us, even in 1, when we get the description of Jesus, is not that we would be able to dissect all the meaning of who this seven-headed beasts are and what the whore of Babylon and all these, like, that can be figured out. But the primary act is to lead us to this point where it's like, oh, like, I need to worship. This is a God that's worth to.
Oh, Almighty means that.
Yeah. Well, like, even by, so you get 2 and 3, which the chapters on the church, and then you go immediately into 4 and 5, which is about the throne of God, and you get this image of the throne of God and this, the multitudes upon multitudes, and then you get the angels, and all they can say, they cry out day and night, holy, holy, holy. Not because there's no other words to the song, but because, like when you're overwhelmed with the holiness of God, what this is all that can come out of me. And so for the church, when we read this, like, this is really a book of worship, of learning what it means to worship God. You know, even when things, because once you get past 4 and 5, then we get into all the plagues and the seals, and then you get to the 12 and 13 with the big battle, and things get real wonky. But you never leave this idea of the description of Jesus in the throne room, and, like, it should lead us to awe, and some that we like to dissect awe so often, and so Revelation becomes like a guidebook for the end times, which, again, it is. But sometimes we choose to pick up the guidebook and forget about the fact that Jesus' appearance to John makes John fall down as one as though dead. He's overwhelmed. It's like, oh, we forgot that God is overwhelming. That's what Almighty means, right? Like that. Like that's. So I don't. I just, this is, to me, like, as we're just even looking at 1 and 2, the first couple chapters, it's like, oh, this should be a very quick turn to worship. Like, and as we're talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, this makes sense. Why? It should be overwhelming. Like, I can't fully comprehend it. Um, and maybe that's where Revelation should lead us, to be like, I can't fully comprehend it, but I know who's the first and the last, and I know that Jesus is victorious, and I'm no matter what comes, then I can hang on. It's a strong start. Chapter 1.
The first and the last part has been clunking around in my brain for a while here, uh, in the rock tumbler that is my brain. Just because if you are an eternal being, there was no beginning, there was no end.
Yeah, interesting.
Um, so, what is the meaning of that?
Meaning of what? First and the last, then?
So, first to rise in the Orthodox practice is the firstborn of the dead, right?
Mm.
So, first to rise, last to die to sin.
Oh. Yeah, I the only thing I can think of if is the like the Hebrews 12
Mm.
where he says like the author and perfecter of faith. You know where there's like these bookends that are given even though God is
Yeah.
eternal. Um it's I that actually that's a great question because I'm having a hard time thinking about it except for maybe that's the point is that it's like God is eternal and infinite and beyond scope, but because we have no concept of how to even begin to imagine the eternal, like even the incarnation of Christ, like I just like to say this word, so I'm going to say it, the condescension of God. I
Yeah.
love that idea that God condescended Himself. It's just such a fun way of thinking about it. That even God, who is eternal and infinite, became incarnate in Jesus, so that when in Hebrews 12, like when we think about God, Jesus is the exact representation of His being. So when we think of Jesus, we think of God. So the only way I can think about it, the first and the last, because you're right, God wouldn't be first and last; He would be beyond that. I do like the firstborn among the dead, but like the last part,
The last part is the part that's still clunking around.
yeah, that's a good. That I can buy the firstborn, but I my only thinking is that it's a way to for God to like incarnate like incarnate himself so that we can understand like okay well we can't think outside of time so because God exists out of time, God's like okay I'm gonna give you your little time concepts. I'm the first and the last, right? Like it's a way to kind of understand like well you know
I'm at
where
both ends of this line.
yeah maybe that's it. It's a good point like how like yeah how do you reconcile the first and the last with an infinite God, and so I'm thinking maybe it's a way for us to understand it. God is using that like
Why introduce
image,
yourself this way? That's
but
a puzzle.
Alpha and the Omega is more than first and the last. I mean it's first and the last letter in the Greek alphabet, so it's kind of like saying
A to
like
Z.
but it's more than first and the
Yeah.
last. It's kind of like I encompass everything. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
Alpha and Omega. Maybe first and the last is like, I encompass and sustain all things. I don't know. That's a great question.
That's it. It's interesting because that part is in quotes, but it is not in a red quote in the the version of the Bible that I'm looking at.
Right. So it's somebody else. It's not Jesus speaking it.
Right, because it says the Lord God, right?
Yeah.
Not Jesus himself saying this. Um, that's interesting. And but he does later say, "I am the first and the last," and that is in red.
Right. Jesus does say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So it.
It comes from. Yeah. It's interesting. So it comes from, and it is. It is. That is interesting. The quotes are what's showing me. To be honest,
Yeah.
that's So is
So the quotes are Alpha and Omega, and then the speech later is first and last.
you're right. Well, he said, "I'm the Alpha and the Omega," in quotes, says the Lord God,
Mm.
out of quotes. And then in quote, "who was and is and who is to come, the Almighty," quote unquote. There could be a chance that John is like elucidating on that idea. Like so maybe it's not a direct. I don't know. That's like that's what I like about your questions. I'm like I've never thought about that.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Like I wonder if John is quoting it somewhere else. Like I'm the Alpha and the Omega. He's quoting. There's no reference. Um, there's an Isaiah reference. Who Isaiah 41:4, who has
Mm.
performed and done this, calling the generations from the beginning. I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am He. So we get that. Uh,
And Isaiah's a prophetic book.
right, but it's still not. Isaiah 44:6, I am the first and I am the last. Beside me, there is no God. So it could be that John is referencing those Isaiah verses to kind of show here's where it's coming from because it's in quotes. Maybe I don't know. That's a really good question.
I'm sure someone has written something about that, but I just the fact that you need to label that as an introduction is odd
Yeah.
because I would hope he recognized him.
By the way, so you know.
It's just interesting, and another thing that is interesting, when he's so awestruck. I fell at his feet as though dead. Um, the detail that he lists next, he placed his right hand on me.
Yeah.
So the fact that he deliberately specifies which hand is interesting.
Yeah.
What did that symbolize for him? I mean, that was the hand he was holding 7 stars in a minute ago.
That's true.
So, ouch. But it's what what happened to the
Let me
stars?
set these down.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Or I mean, it says that they symbolize the angels, right? The mystery of the 7 stars that you saw in my right hand, past tense, um, was the and the 7 golden lampstands. Is this the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches?
Yeah.
So, um, holding those in his hand, and this is where um, perspective changes.
Mm.
So, uh, the box is big if the box is close to my face. The box is
Huh.
small when it's far away from me. It's the same box.
Yeah.
He's holding the 7 angels in his hand. He can put his hand on John, and John perceives this hand as hand size, not giant hand size.
Non star holding size.
Right?
Yeah.
So, wow, we're changing dimensions fast.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So, uh,
Huh.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Like, wow.
Well, it's like,
all
and
over the
that's
place.
it's it's that's that's the role of apocalyptic language, is to be like, okay, like we should not be that this should not be comfortable territory for us, right? That's kind of what like Revelation's all about. Like this should be a little bit um frightening, like
Unsettling for sure.
unsettling,
Yeah.
anxiety. Like we should not. Like, if we read through Revelation, we're like, oh, that was a fun book. We've done it wrong. Like there should be some discomfort, like that, like this. Like how do you set down the stars and then put your right hand? Like it's now we're thinking about dimensionality, and it's these are I don't I like that because it becomes very topsy turvy. But you're supposed, but again, that there's a
But he's writing this down.
yeah, but then he's also right. Like he's also, we're having, yeah. It's I like that even with chapter one. There's already like this kind of topsy turvy. I read this book about the catharsis. That's their word, catharsis of Revelation.
Mm.
That the idea is to in and after like 12 and 13, which is the big battle, up until Jesus puts everything back together in the latter chapters, is they said it's cathartic. It's supposed to make you uncomfortable and anxious, fearful. Like it's supposed to show all that fear, and then it's cathartic to get all that stuff out to show you how God puts everything back together. So it's like the first 19, 18 chapters are all supposed to play on our this is what a guy says, but I like the idea of like, because it's very like, it's like, oh, this is not easy to read, not because it's not easy to understand it. It's just like it's strange, it's fearful, it's unsettling, it's uncomfortable. Um, but I think that's where we're supposed to be.
Yeah. As a non-seminarian, so uh, when you were studying back in your days of studying these kinds of things, uh, was it ever brought up that there are other writings at this time in a similar style?
So and not to critique my seminary, but no. Uh,
Okay.
have I read that since then? Yes. So yes, this does follow Revelation does follow a pattern of apocalyptic writing. It's different, like it's unique. It's not like the same thing, but it does like there is an apocalyptic pattern that plays out that they can find other literature like this.
But not written at the same time.
Not no earlier, but not like that. I mean, it's like there's a cosmic battle in Revelation, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can find cosmic battle stories in
Sure.
earlier literature. So there's non-biblical, like
Right.
you
Yeah.
find, yeah, elsewhere in like Mesopotamian uh, stuff. So there's a yes. So there's a sense where it does follow an apocalyptic pattern, but it does break off a certain point. Like, and that's what the Bible does great, right? There's even the creation narrative, like it follows a an ancient Near Eastern creation narrative, kind of pattern. But then at some point you read it and it breaks off and it's totally different. You're like, oh, like
Yeah,
it's unique.
it's unique. So even though I mean this, there are other apocalyptic writings. I think this is pretty unique. Uh, it's definitely the interpretation of his view of this,
Yeah,
and his interpretation is, like we mentioned earlier, is like completely different from most. He catches details that people overlook,
yeah.
because he's not looking at the earthly. He's looking at more uh, broader themes,
Mm.
broader eternal themes. Um, Whenever he's writing, right? In
Yeah,
the
he
beginning
is.
was the Word.
Yeah,
So, and the Word was God, right? So the fact that you have this a sound uttered by
yeah,
one being that is that being, that's huh,
right.
that's amazing. And then that now we have again one who was his closest friend,
Yeah, that's cool.
unrecognizably shocking to see, and awestruck by the power. And he's just like, "Hey, buddy,"
Yeah,
puts his
remember
hand
me?
on him.
Yeah,
You know, here's what that meant. What you just saw. So to be shown these visions, and then to get some information about what they are, or maybe we're told some translation,
mm.
but is that the whole translation, or is that as much as he could process at that moment? Because if your brain is that fried from what you see, maybe you can only process a little, right? If you're in
Yeah.
that kind of shock.
And it's enough that it was what got written down needed to get written down. But you think like, as an example, um, I was just we were talking about the concert earlier. Sarah and I went to a concert last night or the night before, and we took some video while we were there, and we played it later for family. I sent you a couple, and it was fun to replay because you remember it, but then you try and explain like, no, this is what was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and this is what it felt like. You'd hear the bass, like you hear the,
Yeah.
every time there were dual drums going on, and it was like the whole the sensation of the lights, like it was phenomenal. And you're trying to explain that and like, no, it's really cool. And they're seeing this like the video that dink dink dink
Yeah,
dink dink. It
it's
just
never
doesn't
the same experience.
you can't even with video you can't describe the experience of it. And I wonder if that's what John's like. It's like I trust that he what needed to get written down according to the Spirit of God got written down on the same end. Like it's probably like showing a video of a really cool concert. You're like, this is like I see what he's trying to do, but it's like nothing compared to the
Yeah,
actual
yeah.
like experience of it.
How great was John's shorthand? Because how do you even begin to describe some of these things? And we're getting some imagery that's notable,
Right. Yeah.
right? But wow,
Yeah.
like how do you write that down? How do you, it's an overwhelming vision
Yeah.
that he had to whelm.
That he.
So he had to like he had to put it into words to be able to mail out, right, to seven
Oh,
churches.
that's fantastic.
Yeah. I don't know. That's
John is just
amazing.
whelmed.
Yeah.
It's just
I'm sure that's not the definition, but
I love it. I'm keeping up with it.
if you're going to
Well,
be overwhelmed,
he's just whelmed. He's
yeah,
whelmed enough that he can write it down.
yeah, he
Yeah.
got back to whelmed.
He got back to whelmed. Well, I'll say this just as a closing comments. We'll wrap at least Revelation 1 up. We'll come back for the last part of the church writings and then the temple in the next couple weeks, or the throne of God. Is just I was thinking after you said that similar apocalyptic writings. One thing that we'll see like that I maybe one of my favorite thoughts about not just Revelation but the idea of the death and resurrection of Jesus is that so in all other apocalyptic battles because there's always a battle, um, it's the strength of one God against the strength of another God, right? It's just and you do see the the enemy and God fighting, right? You see that, But the thing that's unique, that there's no other religion, no other apocalyptic writing, nothing, is that the way that Christ beat death and sin is through his own death. Like it's the they call it kind of the victim, that Christ is the fact that the victim is victorious, that Jesus, the victim who died as the sinless death, is the one who's victorious. Like he brought victory through his own death, is unparalleled. You don't find it anywhere else. It's you do find some martyr stuff in other places, but God as the lamb, God is the one who is slain. It does, it's the most unique, it's the most wonderful thing, because he realizes that the way to beat death is that he has to die, that he has to be the one to take on the punishment. um, so that sets all of Revelation off, because you'd see a God who's strong and powerful, the sword, but you don't see God as lamb, and you do in Revelation. It's just really, it's super cool. I really like that part, that God becomes the vulnerable one in order to take on what we couldn't ourselves.
Which was what disappointed the crowd, right? And
Right,
at his
yeah,
crucifixion.
yeah.
That he,
They wanted a conquering hero. They wanted
yeah.
the victorious, and Christ provided the victory. He just did it through his own death, not through being the conquering hero. And then he does come back. I mean, midway through Revelation, he's the lamb, but he does come back as the conquering hero. Um, but it's not like the sword in his mouth is a big deal, because the way he comes back as victorious king is still through a robe dipped in blood, so it reference to the death and resurrection, but as one with the sword coming out of his mouth. So he's not raising up an army, to take up swords. He's not even holding a sword in his hand to inflict death. The sword is the authority of his word, right? He speaks it, and it happens, which is just to me, it's like you know you don't need a God who can fight. You need a God who can speak into creation and change it. That victory comes at the cost of the lamb, right? So it's this really cool trajectory into how we get to the end of Revelation. Anyway, for that, we'll get there in months to come, because this is through Advent that they'll be doing this. So we will be Revelation steeped for we will be whelmed in revelation.
That's right.
That's the subtitle for this series.
Hope, or whelmed. Yeah.
We are whelmed in hope. All right. Well, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
That's a good start to Revelation, and we'll see you next time.
See you next time.